I watched my own brother smile, while everything our father built was taken away from me. He didn't even try to hide how happy he was. I sat there with tears burning my eyes, believing I had just lost my family, my future, and the last promise I ever made to my dad. What I didn't know was that the lawyer hadn't finished the meeting. One sealed envelope was still sitting on the table, and it would destroy the biggest lie my brother had ever told. Before I tell you what happened, if stories about family betrayal and justice keep you watching until the very end, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to Family Betrayal. And one more thing, the faces, photos, and scenes you see on screen are only there to help tell the story. They're not real people from my life, just visual storytelling. My name is Daniel, and my younger brother Ryan always wanted more than he earned. Growing up, I covered for him. If he got into trouble, I took the blame. If he needed money, I handed it over. I believe that's what brothers did. When Dad got sick, everything changed. I moved back home and spent nearly 2 years taking care of him. I drove him to appointments, cooked his meals, and slept on the old couch whenever he needed someone during the night. Ryan hardly showed up. Every excuse sounded believable at first. Work, vacation, the kids. Something always came first. Dad never complained, but every time Ryan canceled another visit, I saw disappointment in his eyes. 3 weeks before Dad passed away, he grabbed my hand and whispered, "No matter what happens, stay honest." I promised him I would. At the funeral, Ryan hugged me in front of everyone. The second we were alone, he asked, "So, when do we meet with the lawyer?" That question hit me harder than losing Dad. A week later, we sat inside the attorney's office. Ryan looked confident. His wife couldn't stop smiling. The lawyer opened the will, cleared his throat, and started reading. Within minutes, my entire world collapsed. Everything, the house, the savings, Dad's investment accounts, had been left to Ryan. I couldn't breathe. Then Ryan looked straight at me and laughed. Ryan didn't even try to hide it. He leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and said, "I guess Dad finally realized who deserved everything." His wife let out a quiet laugh while I sat there staring at the copy of the will. I wasn't angry yet. I was numb. 2 years of taking care of my father suddenly felt like they had never happened. The lawyer kept his eyes on the papers instead of looking at me. That silence hurt almost as much as Ryan's words. I stood up, ready to leave, but something inside me refused to believe my father would erase me from his life like that. He wasn't a perfect man, but he always believed in fairness. I looked at the lawyer and asked, "Did my dad really sign this?" He hesitated for just a second before answering, "Yes, this document is legally signed." That pause stayed in my mind. It was tiny, but I noticed it. Outside the office, Ryan caught up with me wearing the biggest grin I'd ever seen. "You should have visited Dad more," he said. I almost laughed because the lie was so unbelievable. I had spent hundreds of nights in Dad's house, while Ryan barely showed up once a month. Still, he kept talking. "Life isn't fair, Daniel. Maybe it's time you learned that." I drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Every room in my apartment reminded me of Dad. His old fishing hat still hung by my front door. His favorite coffee mug was still in my kitchen because I'd forgotten to return it after his last visit. I picked it up and broke down crying for the first time since the funeral. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Carter, Dad's next-door neighbor. She quietly asked, "Daniel, can I tell you something that's been bothering me?" My heart started racing. She explained that about a month before Dad died, Ryan had visited while I was at the pharmacy. She saw him arguing with Dad on the front porch. The shouting was loud enough for neighbors to hear. Then Ryan carried a folder into the house. I asked what was inside. "I couldn't tell," she replied. "But when he left, your father looked terrified." That sentence wouldn't leave my head. I started thinking about every strange moment during Dad's final weeks. Ryan suddenly insisted on handling paperwork. He kept asking where Dad stored important documents. Once, I even caught him alone in Dad's office, but he claimed he was looking for family photos. What if he wasn't? That night I searched through every box Dad had left me. Old birthday cards, military medals, tax records. Nothing explained the will. Then I found a small notebook Dad used to write reminders. One page had a sentence circled twice. "Meet with Michael alone. Don't trust Ryan with the papers." Michael. That was the lawyer. My stomach dropped. If Dad wrote that, why had the lawyer handed everything to Ryan without asking a single question? I barely slept that night. The next morning, I made a decision that would uncover a secret my brother never imagined anyone would find. And it started with a phone call the lawyer clearly wasn't expecting. The lawyer answered on the third ring. His voice sounded calm, but the second I introduced myself, there was a long silence. I finally said, "Mr. Michael, I found one of Dad's notes. It says he wanted to meet with you alone and that he didn't trust Ryan with the papers. Can you explain that?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he quietly said, "Daniel, can you come to my office? There are things we shouldn't discuss over the phone." That sentence kept replaying in my head during the drive. When I arrived, Ryan wasn't there. For the first time since the reading of the will, the lawyer actually looked me in the eye. He closed the office door and let out a deep breath. "I owe you an apology," he said. My heart started pounding. He explained that a few days before Dad passed away, Ryan had arrived with what appeared to be a revised will. Every signature looked authentic. Every witness form appeared complete. There was nothing obvious that made it illegal. As an attorney, he had to follow the document that seemed valid. But something never felt right, he admitted. He opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. I kept investigating. Inside were copies of security camera screenshots from Dad's bank, visitor logs from the hospital, and records showing Ryan had accessed Dad's safe deposit box while claiming to be helping with estate planning. Then Michael placed another document in front of me. It wasn't a will. It was a handwritten letter from my father. Dad asked me to keep this sealed unless I had serious reason to believe he had been manipulated, Michael said. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The first line made me cry before I even reached the second. "Daniel, if you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong." Dad wrote that he had begun noticing Ryan pressuring him about money almost every visit. He admitted he felt exhausted and confused because of his medication. He even wrote that Ryan kept bringing papers for him to sign when he was too weak to read them carefully. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "The only child who stood beside me every single day was Daniel. If anyone claims I intentionally left him with nothing, don't believe it." I couldn't hold back my tears. Michael told me he had already hired a forensic handwriting expert after noticing small differences in the signature on the final will. The expert's preliminary report had just arrived that morning. The signature wasn't naturally written. It showed strong signs of being traced. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed. It was Ryan. His message read, "Stop digging. You already lost." I stared at the screen, then slowly smiled for the first time in weeks. Because Ryan had no idea that the one envelope everyone thought was unimportant had just become the strongest evidence against him. He was celebrating his victory, completely unaware that, within days, everything he had stolen was about to disappear. Ryan walked into the courthouse wearing the same arrogant smile he had shown the day the will was first read. He shook hands with people in the hallway like he'd already won. When he saw me, he smirked and whispered, "You're wasting your time, Daniel. Dad chose me." I didn't answer. I just looked at the envelope in Michael's hands. The judge listened as Ryan's attorney argued that the signed will was clear and legally binding. For a moment, I felt that same fear all over again. What if the truth wasn't enough? What if Dad's final wish disappeared because of one forged signature? Then Michael stood. He told the court there was one last piece of evidence he had been instructed to protect unless he believed fraud had occurred. He held up the sealed envelope. The room went completely silent. Inside was my father's handwritten letter, signed months before the forged will appeared. Along with it was a notarized statement explaining that if he ever seemed pressured into changing his estate unexpectedly, the court should investigate immediately. Michael then submitted the forensic handwriting report. The expert explained that the signature on the final will showed clear signs of tracing and was inconsistent with every verified signature Dad had written during the previous 10 years. Ryan's smile disappeared. His attorney asked for a break. The judge refused. Then came the moment none of us expected. Mrs. Carter stood and testified that she had seen Ryan arguing with Dad shortly before his death. A bank employee confirmed Ryan had repeatedly tried to access documents without my father present. Finally, security footage showed Ryan entering the attorney's office carrying the same folder that supposedly contained the new will. Ryan's face turned white. For the first time in his life, he had nowhere to run. The judge ruled that the forged will was invalid. Dad's original estate plan was immediately restored. The inheritance was divided exactly as my father had intended from the beginning. Ryan was ordered to return every dollar he had taken and later faced criminal charges for fraud and forgery. As we walked out of the courthouse, Ryan called my name. I turned around. His eyes filled with tears. "I'm your brother," he said. "Please, don't leave me with nothing." For a second, I remembered the little boy who used to ride bikes with me after school. I remembered birthdays, fishing trips, and Christmas mornings. But then I remembered Dad's tired face and the way Ryan laughed while I cried. I simply said, "You stopped acting like my brother long before today." Then I walked away. A few weeks later, I visited Dad's grave with fresh flowers. I thanked him for believing in the truth, even when he knew someone might try to bury it. For the first time since losing him, I felt peace instead of anger. I realized something that day. Money can be stolen. Property can be stolen. Even trust can be stolen. But the truth has a way of waiting patiently until the right moment to be heard. If you've stayed with me until the end, thank you for listening to one of the hardest chapters of my life. I still wonder sometimes, if you were in my place, would you have forgiven Ryan after everything he did, or would you have walked away too? Share your thoughts in the comments because I'd genuinely like to know. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who believes that honesty always matters. And if you want more unforgettable stories of family betrayal, justice, and redemption, don't forget to subscribe to Family Betrayal. Because sometimes the loudest person in the room wins for a moment. But in the end, the truth is the only thing that never has to lie.